What if the lovable wooden puppet Pinocchio was originally written to be hanged to death as punishment for his disobedience? Behind Disney's heartwarming tale of a puppet who becomes a real boy lies Carlo Collodi's 1883 original story. A brutal moral warning where Pinocchio murders his conscience with a hammer, suffers torture and starvation, and was meant to die by execution before publishers demanded a happier ending. We're exploring one of literature's darkest children's stories and examining the shocking violence that Disney carefully erased. This isn't just about animation history, it's about how stories change to reflect what each generation thinks children should learn about consequences, morality, and growing up. When most people think of Pinocchio, they picture Disney's 1940 animated masterpiece. This version presents a warm, morally clear story told through the eyes of Jiminy Cricket, a friendly conscience figure who guides the wooden puppet toward becoming a real boy. In Disney's telling, the lonely woodcarver Geppetto wishes upon a star for his carved puppet to become a real sun. The blue fairy grants this wish, bringing Pinocchio to life with the condition that he must prove himself brave, truthful, and unselfish to become truly human. The story follows familiar beats: Pinocchio's temptation by the traveling puppet show, his famous growing nose when he lies, and his eventual rescue of Geppetto from inside Monstro the whale. Through acts of courage and self-sacrifice, Pinocchio earns his humanity, and the story ends with the happy family reunion Disney audiences expected. This version established the moral framework that most people associate with Pinocchio. Honesty is rewarded, disobedience leads to trouble, and love combined with good choices can overcome any obstacle. But Disney's version required massive changes to the source material, changes that eliminated almost all of the original story's violence, psychological horror, and moral complexity. Carlo Collodi's original L'Avventure di Pinocchio was first published as a serial story in an Italian children's newspaper between 1881 and 1883. Collodi wrote a harsh moral tale designed to frighten kids into obedience through graphic depictions of punishment and suffering. In Collodi's version, Pinocchio isn't a lovable boy making innocent mistakes. He's described as deliberately disobedient, selfish, and violent. From the moment he comes to life, Pinocchio shows contempt for authority and actively seeks to hurt those trying to help him. The character Disney transformed into the friendly Jiminy Cricket was originally called Grillo Parlante, the talking cricket, and his role in the story is brief and brutal. When the cricket tries to give Pinocchio moral advice, the puppet becomes enraged and throws a hammer at the insect, killing him instantly. Collodi uses this act to show readers what happens when children completely reject moral guidance. The punishments that follow are designed to be genuinely terrifying. Pinocchio suffers extreme hunger when he refuses to work, endures kidnapping and torture by criminals, and at one point has his legs burned completely off in a fire. Most shocking is Collodi's original ending. He intended for Pinocchio to be executed for his crimes and failures. The story was meant to conclude with the puppet's corpse swinging from a tree as a final warning to disobedient children about the consequences of rejecting moral authority. When Collodi submitted his original ending, publishers and readers reacted with horror. The children's newspaper that was serializing the story received complaints from parents and threats to cancel subscriptions. The idea of a children's story ending with the protagonist's execution was too disturbing even for 19th century Italian audiences. Under pressure, Collodi reluctantly continued the story, introducing the character he called the blue-haired child, a mysterious fairy figure who saves Pinocchio from death and gives him another chance at redemption. This character would evolve into Disney's Blue Fairy. The blue-haired child represents the possibility of redemption, but only through continued suffering and moral testing. Even after his resurrection, Pinocchio faces more trials, more punishments, and more opportunities to fail. The punishments become more psychologically complex as Pinocchio struggles with the knowledge that he has already died once for his failures and could face death again if he doesn't change. The final transformation into a real boy in Collodi's version isn't a reward for single acts of heroism. It's the result of prolonged suffering that finally breaks Pinocchio's will to rebel and forces him to accept social and moral conformity. Collodi's violent approach to children's stories wasn't unusual for his era. In the 19th century, children's literature regularly featured graphic punishments, deaths, and suffering as teaching tools. This approach reflected contemporary beliefs about child psychology and moral development. Educators and parents believed that children were naturally inclined towards sin and selfishness, and that only fear of severe consequences could motivate them toward proper behavior. Collodi specifically wrote Pinocchio during Italy's unification period, when the new nation was struggling to create shared cultural values and social cohesion. His story served as a warning about the dangers of individualism and rebellion against authority. The original Pinocchio functioned as a form of social control, using fear and graphic imagery to convince children that conformity and obedience were necessary for survival. The puppet's suffering served as a cautionary example of what happened to those who refused to accept their place in society. Contemporary filmmakers and writers have recently returned to Pinocchio's darker origins. Guillermo del Toro's 2022 stop-motion adaptation explores themes of death, war, and political oppression. Del Toro's Pinocchio exists in fascist Italy during World War II, using the puppet story to examine how authoritarian societies try to control and shape individual identity. In Del Toro's version, the relationship between father and son becomes complicated by grief, trauma, and political pressure. Pinocchio's disobedience is a form of resistance against social forces that demand conformity. The story becomes an allegory for maintaining individual humanity in the face of dehumanizing political systems. Other modern adaptations have explored different aspects of the story's dark themes. Some versions focus on the horror elements of a living puppet trapped between life and death. Others examine the psychological trauma of a father trying to replace a dead child with an artificial substitute. The evolution of Pinocchio reflects broader changes in how societies approach moral education for children. Collodi's brutal original assumes that fear and punishment are the most effective motivators for good behavior. Disney's version suggests that love, encouragement, and positive role models work better than threats and violence. The story's enduring popularity across all these different versions suggests that the basic premise continues to resonate with fundamental human anxieties about identity, belonging, and moral development. What makes Pinocchio particularly relevant to contemporary audiences is its exploration of artificial life and the relationship between creator and creation. Collodi's story predates modern discussions about artificial intelligence, robotics, and genetic engineering, but it addresses many of the same fundamental questions. The relationship between Geppetto and Pinocchio explores the responsibilities that creators have toward their creations, the psychological motivations behind creating artificial life, and the question of what makes something truly alive rather than just functional. Modern adaptations often emphasize these technological and philosophical dimensions, using Pinocchio's story to explore anxieties about artificial intelligence, genetic modification, and the extent to which human nature can be programmed or controlled. From Collodi's brutal moral warning to Disney's heartwarming family tale to modern explorations of technology and identity, Pinocchio's story continues to evolve because it addresses fundamental questions about what it means to be human. The wooden puppet's struggle to become real reflects every person's journey from childhood dependence to adult moral autonomy. Whether that journey is portrayed as requiring fear-based obedience, love-guided growth, or complex resistance to social control depends on what each generation believes about human nature and moral development. And perhaps that's why Pinocchio will never stop changing, because each new version reveals as much about its creator's fears and hopes as it does about the puppet's eternal quest to become truly human.